Hello, everybody. My name's Rick McCutcheon, and welcome to PartnerTalks. Today we have Dan Diefendorf from TheTestMart. Dan, introduce yourself to the people and tell them who you are and what you do.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So just a little bit about me. I've been in the Microsoft ecosystem probably the last 15 years or so. I originally started in services, as most of us do one way or the other. I've started across ERP implementations, some Dynamics, some other platforms, as well as some CRM implementations for an application development partner at the time. And then when the cloud really started to take off, I pretty much invested the rest of my career into really product growth in the cloud and what that meant. But really, if I think about the crux of my experience, it's been around digital transformation. And whether it was implementing something, whether it was trying to find a new widget or tool to latch on to an ERP or to a CRM, it was really trying to make that thing as most productive as possible and more digital over time. And so I've been lucky that most of my time has been in the Microsoft ecosystem, and that's kind of brought me here to TestSmart. The TestSmart, is heavily focused on testing and validation, which I know we'll get into, but I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit.
Okay, so the TestSmart is a company that you're now the CEO of, and you've been there since day one with the organization. Tell us what the TestSmart does, and in the second part, tell us, exactly what problem are you solving that was out there?
Yeah. So I've been on the board from near the beginning of the TestSmart, and most recently as CEO close to the last 2 years. So initially when the company was founded, it was very focused on F&O, finance and operations. And really, if you just boil it down, is every Microsoft update became a fire drill. And that's why the company started. And so those fire drills became more frequent over time and maybe a bit more hectic. And so that was the core thesis of what we were solving from day one. So what we saw was companies would spend a lot of money on the implementation and then almost nothing or a very small percentage of that budget to protect it. So we started in the Dynamics F&O world, and then we've expanded from there.
Okay, and I've done quite a bit of work with your organization over the last couple of years, and it really sort of educated me, even though I'm a CRM MVP, about, the costs of testing, especially on the ERP side of things. So talk a little bit about how the problem exists with customers who don't use a product like the TestSmart, and what are some of those hidden costs?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the vast majority of the market is doing manual testing today. So organizations all around the world, it doesn't matter if you're F&O, FSCM, field service, CE, or Business Central. Most customers are doing manual today because that's where they start. If they take a step further, they'll try Microsoft's tool, RSAT, which is typically the next step. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is make it as easy as possible so testing is almost invisible, right? But oftentimes, customers really want to utilize their staff. But their staff are typically in all environments in the same situation. They have day jobs. They're not experts at testing, but they are the ones who know the business process, they know the business workflows. And if we're really lucky, they know their ERP environment as well. And so they're the ones that the technical teams or IT has to lean on to help do the testing, typically manually, like I said. And then really over time, you're recreating those test plans, really every quarter, every 2 quarters, minimally. We're seeing now customers want to test that much more frequently now. And the pace of change is just too much. So there's got to be a better way. We're always trying to bring the easy button to the market, but it requires a little bit of work to get into automation. But once you do, it really does help that testing, in a sense, disappear over time. That's really our ultimate vision and goal.
And I believe that if you're using the Microsoft tool, it sort of tests the Microsoft applications, but it doesn't test all the ISV applications you may have attached to your finance and operations or your ERP program.
That's exactly it, Rick. So when we started, we really thought of ourselves as a tool for finance and operation, Dynamics tool. And we thought, it's sort of a faster, better, cheaper way of getting around the update cycle and really just being a testing platform. We've shifted that now, so now we view ourselves as a Dynamics testing platform, not just a tool. So what does that mean? That means our customers have multiple problems, right? So that they invest heavily into an ERP. ERP runs their business. And then you have the sort of a secondary and lower environments or adjacent environments that do other things that the core ERP doesn't support. It could be homegrown applications. It could be other ISVs. It could be things that they buy that have nothing to do with Dynamics, but it has a key part of a business flow, something like asset management or something that sits outside of Dynamics. And the truth is, customers are anchored just like we are in Dynamics, but it doesn't represent their world. So we had to rethink how we thought about this, particularly the last 2 years, is, we had to be cloud native just like our customers are. We have to be able to test the full D365 ecosystem. And really the delimiter was, we used to have to answer the question, do we integrate with blah? Do we integrate with even something like Salesforce? Do we integrate with the asset management tool? And over time, we had to keep adding and adding and adding. We had to completely change our architecture just to be able to say yes. It doesn't matter what the platform is, whether it's an ERP or any web-based application, we can test it. And that's really been the big change for us, is we wanted to reduce the friction that any customer would have when they were talking to us and thinking about investing, because ultimately this is sort of a line item on their budget. Sometimes, preferably, it gets tied in the tail end of their implementation because they're thinking about testing really early. But more often than not, it's post-implementation and they've already got their headcount, they've got their tech budgets, and they need to figure out how to maybe take costs out or figure out how to make more done with less. And that's where we wanted to remove the friction. So we're less about thinking about only testing the ERP. We want the entire stack performing and validating.
And I think that's important, Dan, because, if we think about when testing, showed up, it's usually when we're ready to go live. Okay, we start thinking about how are we going to test? But in actuality, we should be thinking about a testing automation system while we're building and deploying.
That's exactly it. I mean, when you're building and deploying, most partners are doing this work right aside their customers, right? And they're trying to get around, what was their former business process? What is their to-be business process? How does their business operate? Can it operate more optimally? Can we reduce the number of steps? Can we do it potentially with very few or no customizations? Like, all those things are incredibly important. And once you get your arms around that, that documentation is invaluable when it comes to testing. And we see a lot of customers that do a good job using that to implement, to go live. But it's a bad analogy maybe. But you think about all the people that are kind of going up Everest, right? The trick is getting to the top of Everest. The problem is you got to climb down. And you're kind of tired when you're climbing down, and you got to do all the things to make sure you make it back to the base camp. So that's kind of the way we look at it, as well as going live is certainly something that's important. It's a milestone. It's certainly an emotional milestone to do that. But then you want things as sort of easy as possible to support thereafter, and that's where doing it early in the cycle is a lot easier than doing it afterwards. Now, don't get me wrong, Rick. The vast majority of organizations typically want to see how their environment is going to operate first, and then do it. But if we have a choice in the matter, we always try to start that process earlier, particularly in our partners that we work with.
Okay, so this is a good segue into partners, because I know partners are very important to the TestSmart. Let's talk a little bit about how you work with partners today.
Yeah. So very early days, we established a very nice referral partner ecosystem, which basically means, other partners that, were primarily services based, that were looking for a testing partner to lean into because they had customers dealing with all the challenges that I discussed earlier. We've since expanded that into ways partners can make money and to expand their renewable revenue, basically their annual recurring revenue, which is a big thing. And what's happening is most partners have some kind of a managed service offering. It's post go live, it's post hypercare, where they support the environment, they support the modules, they support all the things that are customized and make sure those customizations are working. And then testing becomes front and center in those environments. And typically what happens, partners will look at all the same things customers do. Well, way to use people, way to potentially use Microsoft's tool. They'll look at different automation partners like us or others. And inevitably, there are some relationships that we build over time where we've expanded that and we've turned it into more of a validation practice, if you will, for a partner. So think about it like validation as a service. So customers will look at partners that use us and be able to not only test all the things, right? You're testing the ERP, you're testing the integrations, you're testing the customizations, but you're also being able to say, okay, when .46, .47, .48 goes live, we can validate to our executives that the things are going to work. And not only is it going to work, it's auditable. It prepped us for what's going to happen the next release, and everything is set up. So what happens after you test and validate that environment, you could do whatever you want. You can wait until the next planning cycle, the next release, and just do the regressions then. Or you could even do hourly regressions, or probably not hourly, that's extreme, but maybe daily regressions. We have some customers that do daily regressions just to make sure that they've got sort of a constant, live look at their environment. And we support all that. And I really think that's how partners that want to build a deeper ongoing offering and relationship with their customers, they'll typically do that. So it's really validation as a service and thinking about how to structure customers along that line. So testing doesn't feel like a huge lift throughout the year. It's more a continuation of the environment that they're supporting.
So if we look at it, Dan, that you stated earlier on that most people still do manual testing, and I think most partners still haven't, decided on what testing platform that they want to represent. But if this is really important to a partner, first of all, you want to go in and win a deal. You want to bring this up as a subject to say, hey, we've got this covered for you. And all the work we do when we go live, we're going to turn it all over to you and you're all set up to test. The other thing I think about is this is not a profitable business for a partner if a customer has testing problems. Like if an update takes their system down, partners got to react. And they've got to go and do their CSI work and see what happens. And they don't want to be billing a lot of money to the customer for this. So if they can, outsource this and have the TestSmart handle it, I think it's a profitable business decision.
Yeah, and I think particularly when it comes to partners, listen, I've been in the ecosystem a long time. I've kind of been on more of the ISV side of the house when I transitioned out of services. And it's always interesting when you bring a software product to partners. You don't want it to eat into their core revenue streams. You want to be able to amplify the things that they do best. And that's the way we think about sort of our partner strategy as we work with other service and implementation partners, is we want their people to be amplified to their end customer. So as much as it will automate, it will help them do some work to make the testing and validation cycles more seamless over time. It will also help amplify their knowledge of their customer's environment and be able to make recommendations to them while gaining profitable revenue in the process. So to us, it's, we're very thoughtful about how we do that, and we're expanding even that for 2026.
And this segues into 2026. What's coming for the TestSmart in 2026? Let's first talk about AI, both in the product and how you're going to use it internally.
Yeah. So I said earlier, the kind of our thought is like to make testing invisible. And AI plays a big part in that. But, we've all had our experiences with AI, right? Early on, we're all kind of testing out professionally and personally, and it hallucinates sometimes and all that. I feel like that's kind of behind us in a lot of ways. But when we think about AI at the TestSmart, it's to be really intentional about it. By example, I asked the entire team to think about anything that they do, whether it's a routine task or something that's client facing, how we can use AI to make it more valuable to that end consumer, right? So that's sort of the first part. The second part is product and engineering. I've been very intentional as well about the team that I've hired over the last almost 2 years. People that, hiring for a core AI skill set is not always the most easy thing to do. So we kind of look for, curiosity. We look for obviously some technical skills and everything else, but our entire product and engineering team is very savvy about being curious about these tools and using things that are very performant, that are secure, and deterministic. So deterministic is one of the biggest things that I think that we talk about when we use AI, because testing is not one of these fluffy, subjective things. It passed or it didn't. And if it did pass, we want to know that it passed for the right reasons, that we caught everything possible. And when I say everything possible is, we talk a lot about user intent. So user intent is we are capturing what the user is actively doing on the screen. Not only like the physical clicks or what's in the DOM, but it's like, what do they intend to do when they're doing their steps? And then we also capture what's happening sort of, I would say, like behind the screen as well. Is that physically mirrored in the application itself? So is the user getting the result that they expect to get? And is the data flowing and the outcome happening behind the scenes in the ERP? And we marry those two together into a test. So when that test is submitted, we have the user intent, and then we have the system intent and results. And then we can then use AI to self-heal that. And that's really important. That's what we refer to as deterministic testing. It's not fluffy, it's not subjective, it's purely objective. And we can tell a customer that it passed for the right reasons, and we can validate that. And then we continue to support those tests ongoing. So AI plays a huge role in that. Every time, so if we, just real quick, I won't go long on this, but you have some of the UI testing. UI testing is a very basic thing. And we now use AI to support UI testing. So it goes well beyond just the pure DOM or document object model, just basically the things measured on the screen, to potentially 6, 7, 8 layers behind that. And then, like I said, we also will do API testing. And API testing is not testing the API, just to be clear. It's using the APIs to get at what we're trying to test. And then we marry all those results together in our test execution engine. That is once we have that, we can use AI, like I said before, to self-heal. We can use it to create results. We can predict what's going to happen in the environment. And then we can use that as a conversation starter for potential things customers should be thinking about in future releases, particularly as they start adding integrations and thinking about a more cohesive environment that they're testing.
So their testing becomes more proactive.
Yeah, it really does. And, it is, a little bit of work on the front end to do that, meaning you do have to take a look at these environments, kind of think about how you want it to act on the back end. But once you do that, it really does work. And that's probably been the biggest transition and transformation in our own business the last like 12, 14 months even. As customers dragged us there, partners dragged us there. They're like, this needs to have lower friction, it needs to be better, it needs to be easier. And even for us, from our own go-to-market perspective, we want, whether we're dealing with an end customer or partner, we want to make sure that there's as little friction as possible.
Okay, excellent, Dan. So we're Q1 2026 for this recording. Where are we going to be able to see the TestSmart this year? What shows will you be attending, and what types of promotions will you be doing?
Yeah, one of the things I don't know if it's the Dynamics ecosystem or if it's just in general, but I feel like, my friends and colleagues, we're all leaning into events. I've said I've been in the Microsoft ecosystem a long time. I used to going a lot of the pure Microsoft events like Ignite, but over the last year and a half, I've really leaned into getting into the summits, the different regional shows and everything else, and we doubled or tripled down this year on all that. We increased our budget. I wouldn't say exponentially, but here in North America in particular, we're going to be at a lot of shows. We're trying to sponsor most every show we go to. Some of the regionals we don't sponsor, we may just attend, but we are sponsoring a number of regionals. We'll be at the AI and Copilot summits, definitely Summit, Dynamics Con, and we have a couple international shows we're starting to look at as well. Probably about 65-70% of our sales today are North America. The rest is international. So we're going to continue to expand some international presence, but I think you'll see us quite a bit around the shows here in the U.S. in particular.
Okay, Dan, I want to thank you for your time, and it's always great getting caught up about the TestSmart, and I'm sure we'll be back to you in the near future to find out your next move on the AI testing front.
Great. Thanks so much, Rick. Take care.
Have a great day. Bye for now.